Hello, and a very warm welcome to札幌学院 University's Community College Global Issues in English. And today's topic is farming. Before we begin, I would recommend that you visit this page where you can find vocabulary support and language exercises to help you understand the topic. Also, before we begin, I would like to show you my lunch, which is an apple. This is an apple, but I would like you please to imagine that this is the planet Earth. Now, as you know, the planet Earth is 75% made up of sea and ocean. So we cut out here, we can cut out the sea and the ocean, and this part, just this part, is the land. Now on this land, we can see, if I can cut this nicely, 1/3 of the land we can see is ice and snow. This will be at the North Pole or the South Pole or across Canada and northern Siberia, and this is no use for farming. Another 1/3 of the land we can see here is mountains and deserts. Mountain regions, for example, the Himalayas or the Rockies or the Andes, deserts, the Sahara Desert and the Atacama Desert and the Gobi Desert, etc., etc. Again, we cannot use this for farming. Also, this is made up of forests and jungles, which again, we cannot use for farming. So this leaves only this part, and if we divide this into one part, this is wetland and rocky land and steep hills and places again that are no good for farming. And when we target this as well, we can see that this part is cities and towns and roads and highways and concrete, and again we cannot use for farming. So all we are left is with this, and this is the farming land that we have on the planet Earth. And it makes up only 3% of the world and only 11% of the world's land area. And in this topic, I will be seeing if we are doing a good job in taking care of this or not. So let's go on. To continue, we can see that we farm 3% of the planet Earth is farmland, 11% of the Earth's land mass is farmland. Now when we think about farming, we can see that the world has about 50,000 edible crops and vegetables. That means we can eat about 50,000 different types of crops and vegetables. However, we only eat a few of them. For example, how many vegetables do you eat in your daily life? Most people eat only about 20 at the most, and many people don't eat so many. Another example is that just 3 of the crops that we have, rice, maize or corn, and wheat, provide about 60% of the world's energy intake. Plus, of course, meat, fish, and animal products. As we saw in another talk, people are eating more protein than they need, especially meat, and we can see the meat is the red area and the vegetables are the green area, and we have more than we need. We also have staple crops, the food that everybody eats very regularly, and we can see number 1 is maize. Maize is another word for corn, and I will be using the word corn throughout this talk. And you can also see that maize is by a long way the most popular kind of food in the world. So we have maize, rice, wheat, potatoes, cassava, and then soybeans at number 6, sweet potatoes, yams, sorghum, and plantains, bananas, coming lower down. Maize is in red and soybeans is in red. These are 2 of the topics that I want to focus on in this talk. So let's start with corn. World corn production, you can see in the United States produces the most, and China the next most, so very, very big producers of corn in these countries. And now here's a short history lesson for corn in the United States. In the 19th century, American farmers began to move westwards And when they reached the middle of the country, they found the land was very, very good for corn, and so they grew a lot of corn, and they fed the corn to their pigs and their chickens, and they ate corn themselves, but they were producing too much corn. So they had to think very carefully how we can sell the extra corn, and their first idea was to make corn whiskey. In fact, alcoholism was a serious problem in the United States in the second half of the 19th century. However, American farmers were still making too much corn, so they had to think again. And then they came up with an idea of making corn starch. First of all, starch was used in ironing and preparing clothes, but later, of course, became useful as a food, along with corn flour. However, American farmers were still making too much corn, so they had to think very carefully, and of course they came up with corn oil was next, which they marketed. However, they were still making too much corn, so they had to think again, and they came up with something called high fructose corn syrup, which in fact was developed by two Japanese scientists in the middle of the 20th century. And this is a sugar substitute, and in many, many of the foods we eat, they contain HFCS. For example, if you drink a bottle of Coca-Cola, the number one ingredient, of course, is water. The number two ingredient is HFCS. However, they were still making too much corn, and so they had to think again and said, well, let's feed the corn to our cows. Now, as we can see from the pictures, cows eat grass, not corn. This is a topic I will be coming back to talk about in a moment. But still, they're making too much corn, and so they had to think again, and finally they came up with ethanol, which is gasoline made from corn. And now we can see the patterns of corn use. We can see here that most of the corn is fed to animals. We see a picture of a cow here. However, pigs and chickens are also included. And this purple area in the bottom here, this is ethanol, the gasoline that is made. This is for industrial alcohol. This is for exports in the green. And this is just for human use. This is all that's used for humans. So we can see most of the corn is used for other purposes. However, we still eat a lot of corn in our everyday diets. Here we can see, yes, the combination, the animal food is 48.7%, ethanol 30%, human use 7.5%, and then exports are the other. How much corn do we eat, or how much corn is in our diets? A surprisingly large amount. In an average American supermarket, there are about 45,000 different items. 25% of them contain corn. And we can imagine in Japan, it will not be much different. Here's a little quiz. Only one item in the following list does not contain corn. Which one do you think it is? Beer, coffee whitener, yogurt, mayonnaise, mustard, hot dogs, toothpaste, matches, paint, batteries, cosmetics, eggs, canned fruit, spinach, cardboard boxes, and soda drinks. The answer is spinach. Everything else has corn in it somewhere. Very surprising. When we grow corn very intensively, we damage the soil. We can see here in the autumn, heavy rains will cause the soil to run off the fields into the rivers, and this again causes serious problems. Here in Hokkaido in spring, very often we have strong winds, and we can see the soil being blown off the fields into the roads and other places, and again it causes a lot of damage. Farmers also use a lot of pesticides and herbicides. Pesticides are chemicals to kill insects. Herbicides are chemicals to kill unwanted grasses, and we use a lot of these chemicals. In 2000 and 2007, the world used approximately 2.4 million tons of pesticides. The US uses approximately 500,000 tons of pesticides. That's 22% of the world total. The US uses about 1 kilogram of pesticides per hectare of farmland, compared to 4.7 kilograms in China, 1.3 kilograms in the UK, 5.9 kilograms in Japan. So Japan uses a lot of chemicals in its farms, and then 2.5 kilograms in Italy. Farmers also use a lot of fertilizer. Most of the fertilizer is nitrogen or phosphorus, and you can see since the year 2010, this is in the United States, the amount of fertilizer is going up and up. And this also causes very serious problems. We saw the water, the mud running off the fields. It goes into the rivers. This is the Mississippi area, the Missouri and the Mississippi basin running down into the Gulf of Mexico, and it creates what we call dead zones. And the dead zones we can see are things like the red tides here and the dead fish here, so causing a lot of damage. This was the Mississippi River, but we can see it in all the big rivers in the world, and it is not a good pattern to follow. And to go back to the cows, as we mentioned before, cows eat grass, they don't eat corn. Now in the United States, a beef cow will eat grass for the first 6 months of its life and will then be taken to a feedlot and fed corn. Now why do we feed corn to cows? One, it's very economic because cows get fatter more quickly. They produce a very tender marble beef, which is very delicious. However, these cows are also given steroids and hormones to help them grow more quickly. But cows fed corn also get sick. It is not natural for them to eat corn, and they get sick. Therefore, they are given antibiotics, medicine, and about 70% of all antibiotics used in the US are fed to animals, to cows or to pigs or to chickens. Now farmers will say that the level of steroids and hormones is too low to make much difference to human beings. They also say that the antibiotics are a different type than used by human beings, but we must recognize that this is not a natural process. All right, from corn, let's move on to soybeans, and we can see the world production of soybeans. The United States is the leader, Brazil is number 2, Argentina is number 3, and then other countries. Recent research shows that Brazil and the United States are about the same now in producing soybeans. After harvesting, soybeans are separated into some groups: soybean meal, which we can see here on the left, and soybean oil, and of course soybeans or edamame. A quiz question for you: what % of the world's soybean meal is used to feed animals, do you think? The answer is 98%. On the other hand, 88% of soya oil is consumed by humans. Now we can see the countries that export soybeans. Brazil is number 1 in the blue, and then the United States the number 2. So these are the largest countries, and the lower pie chart shows soybeans importing countries. China imports the most soybeans, a very large amount. Then the European Union also imports a lot. And these are mostly, of course, to feed their animals. Growing soybeans intensively in Brazil has all the same problems as in the US, with the use of pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers. Plus, unfortunately, in Brazil, we also have the problem of cutting forests and burning forests, damaging very, very precious areas of the world. And every day we can see the Earth loses 32,300 hectares of tropical forest. So what we see when we go back to our land, we are taking land away from the forests and putting it into our farmland. Now we can see some of the countries that are losing most of their forests, and Brazil again is the number 1. Indonesia, Congo, Bolivia, Malaysia follow, and this is doing an awful lot of damage to our planet. How many animals do we eat every year? Well, we can see we eat 1.47 pigs every year, 300 million cows and sheep as well. And now another quiz for you. What's the meaning of this number? It's 65 billion. And a hint, it's connected to the last slide. What do you think it might be? The answer is it's the number of chickens humans eat every year. So to go back, we can see 1,470,000,000 pigs, 547 million sheep, 300 million cows, and this is unsustainable. We cannot continue to use our land in this way. So how about the future? What can we do? One answer is to eat less meat. And recently we can see artificial meats coming onto the market. Two very large companies, one is called Impossible Foods and the other is called Beyond Meat. And these are becoming very, very popular, especially in the United States and Europe. The value of plant-based meat sales in the US in 2019 was $5 billion, so it's a very big business. Now, I don't know if we can see the figures at the bottom, but I'll tell you the projected value in 2027, so 7 years from now, they estimate that the value of artificial meat will be $74,200,000,000. So this is a very fast growing market. We have different kinds of artificial meat, and this one means you do not have to kill an animal. You take cells from the animal, you mix them in the laboratory, you attach them to another structure, and you can make any kind of meat that you like. In this case, we can see it's a hamburger, but you can make a steak or mince or any type of the part of the animal that you like. Because you don't have to kill the animal, you need not to have so many cows in the world, and so this is a very useful future technology. However, at the moment it's very expensive and the price needs to come down. We have other technological possibilities, meat and other foods from bacteria and fungi. A company in Finland called Mitai is producing meat in the laboratory. A company called Corn is now quite popular in Europe. Corn is actually owned by the Japanese company Nissin, which of course makes your instant noodles. And on the right, a company called Solar Food, which is also making various foods from bacteria. And how about vegetables? If we eat less meat, we perhaps be eating more vegetables. The growth recently of indoor farms, of urban farms, of underground farms, of vertical farms, all of this indoor farming is becoming a booming industry. And we can see this picture of the person below holding a lettuce. This factory in Miyagi Prefecture produces 10,000 lettuces every day. The picture on the right shows a vertical farm in Singapore producing again a lot of vegetables, and this is very clearly one of the directions of the future. The advantages of these farms is they produce large amounts of vegetables in very small spaces. They use 96% less water. They use LED lights, which may be powered by renewable energy, and they may be heated by geothermal power. They do not need pesticides because they are clean environments, and they may be located conveniently near your home. So these are very, very important developments in food production. And finally, the population of the world is growing. It will be between 9 and 10 billion people soon. We can feed everyone in the world if we don't give all of our corn and soybeans to animals. Now, we don't need to become vegetarians. I'm not a vegetarian, but I am eating less meat. We can eat less meat. And the Japanese Minister of the Environment, Mr. Koizumi, suggested meatless Mondays, which means 1 day a week we don't eat meat. Unfortunately, the Japanese Ministry of Agriculture said, no, that's not a good idea. I hope you enjoy your lunch. I have my lunch here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again.